The prophecy was true. This young boy would become the chosen one. In 1458 BC, in the heart of the Levant. Two of the largest armies humanity had ever witnessed now stand face to face. The fate of Egypt hangs in the balance, and at the head of the Kemetic army stands a young commander, leading his forces against the combined might of the kingdom of Kadesh.
If the Asiatic coalition wins, the civilization of Egypt will collapse.
This is not legend, this is a true story. The chronicle of this epic struggle was carved into a stone wall in the temple of Karnak more than 3,500 years ago. It tells us how a young prince, raised in the most dire time of his empire, turned this threat into an empire that would eventually span 3 continents. This is the story of the greatest pharaoh of all time, Thutmose III. For a generation, Egypt's 3 million people had lived in peace and prosperity. Amos was a young farmer, working the wide, fertile fields along the banks of the Nile. Their lives depended on the many seasons of the Nile. Although Egyptians often marry young, the sophistication of their society, from its stable food supply to its advances in medicine and sanitation, gives them one of the highest standards of living in the ancient world. In fact, their life expectancy is nearly double that of many neighboring kingdoms. Amos and his family dreamed that one day they might save enough to buy land of their own, perhaps even a horse, a symbol of true prosperity. But on this day, the air carried a darker sign. Blackbirds circled over Egypt. The great queen Hatshepsut had died, and all of Kemet fell into mourning. While the nation mourns, trouble is gathering in the north.
Hold the wrap steady. I'll pass the bandage under his shoulder.
I've got it. Pull it tight so the resin sets clear.
The Prince of Kadesh has rallied the tribes of the Levant, forging a single coalition with one purpose: to advance upon Egypt.
The tribes have gathered, and the banners of Kadesh ride as one. By nightfall we reach the Nile Road.
He knows that in this moment of sorrow, Egypt is vulnerable, and he knows something else. The prince soon to take the throne is young and untested. He rallied more than 100 princes to his cause, all of them more than willing to join and liberate themselves from the influence of Egypt. There was once a widespread belief that Queen Hatshepsut, Thutmose's stepmother, had deliberately prevented the young prince from taking the throne. But modern scholarship tells a different story. Many historians now argue that Hatshepsut was not blocking his rise, but preparing him, guiding and protecting the boy until he was ready to face the difficult years that lay ahead. Hatshepsut, one of the few female pharaohs in the long history of Kemet, had risen to unmatched prominence. Through bold trade missions and enlightened diplomacy, she transformed Egypt into the wealthiest kingdom of its age. Her legendary expedition to Punt brought home riches so vast that they reshaped the empire's economy for generations. But Hatshepsut was no warrior. Her genius lay in preserving peace, in keeping the two lands stable, prosperous, and united. And she understood something with absolute clarity. When she was gone, Egypt would need a protector. So she prepared her stepson. Throughout his formative years, the young Thutmose was trained relentlessly in the arts of war. He studied strategy, mastered weapons, drilled with soldiers, and even rode into real battles. By the time he came of age, the once quiet prince had become hardened by combat, forged into the warrior Egypt would one day need.
Thutmose also did something remarkable, something no pharaoh before him had ever done. He ordered the details of his coming campaign to be carved directly onto the walls of the temple of Karnak. Not in fragments, not in vague praises, but in full, a clear account of the challenges he faced and the decisions he made. Because of this, we have an extraordinary window into his world, a level of context almost unheard of in ancient records. And yet, very few visitors who walk through Karnak today realize the significance of what they are seeing, or what you are about to learn. Even fewer know of his scribe Chanini, who recorded the events in such vivid details.
Reading from Chanini's own words, quote, "On the 25th day, His Majesty reached the fortress of Jaru, embarking on his first campaign to expand the borders of Egypt by force. Soon after taking the throne, Thutmose led his troops from Thebes to the fortress of Jaru, nearly 500 miles to the north.
Jaru lies on the Syrian border.
It is here that Egypt's largest military outpost stands guard, the gateway and the choke point between Africa and the entire Levantine world.
The legions are strong, but not enough. We need more men before we strike. Scouts say the Syrians gather in great number across the border.
So they do, and yet we shall meet them. The Nile has never favored the timid.
There, the young prince listened to the counsel of his chief general, Jehuti, an experienced soldier. They only have a few weeks to come up with a strategy to defend Egypt's borders. In the room with them is Chanini, the scribe. Many have called him the world's first war correspondent, and his words on the Temple of Karnak paint a grim picture. Quote, "At this time, all the Syrian tribes, from Sharuhin and Yarazah to the very edges of the known world, had risen in revolt against His Majesty.
The Prince of Kadesh and his allies had gathered near the city of Megiddo, not far from present-day Jerusalem.
Kadesh had convinced the northern warlords to give him every fighting man they could muster. And now, under his command, stood the largest Syrian army ever assembled. Strong of some 13,000 men, he is sure that this time Kemet will fall.
The scouts return with news far worse than the young pharaoh expected.
Megiddo lies only 150 miles from Egypt's borders, and the enemy force is overwhelming. Thutmose is heavily outnumbered. He needs more men. He sends word to every corner of Kemet. Levies are called.
farmers, carpenters, masons, all are conscripted into the battle line. Young Amos knows his duty. He also knows that the chances of returning from this campaign are slim. But for every peasant in Kemet, war carries a dangerous promise.
Come back to me, my Amos.
If he does return, the spoils of victory could change his family's life forever. Perhaps enough to buy land of their own, perhaps even a horse. Amos says goodbye to his wife, then, alongside 6,000 other young men from across the kingdom, he marches toward the unknown. Amosa was one of the many men who now faced the very real possibility of death in the struggle against the Syrians. In February 1458 BC, Amosa and his fellow conscripts arrived at the fortress of Jaru. The Pharaoh is mustering every fighting man in Egypt to hurl against the Asiatics, who now threaten to invade Kemet. Amosa is a peasant farmer who has never seen battle. Yet now he is about to become part of the most sophisticated army the world has ever known. The logistics of the Egyptian army are a marvel to behold. Quartermasters oversee the distribution of food, armor, and weapons with astonishing precision. Every day, the army consumes 14,000 tons of grain and 90,000 liters of water. The wealth of Egypt wars into the war effort. But the Egyptians had a secret weapon. Among their ranks marched their brothers from the south, an elite corps of professional soldiers. Sila had joined the army only 3 years earlier, yet already he could strike a moving target from 100 meters away. They were known as the Medjay. In the ancient world, no projectile unit was deadlier. Their effective range stretched from 100 to 200 meters, and they could harass enemies from as far as 350 meters, more than 1,000 feet. Their arrows often carried fast-acting poisons, making even a glancing strike fatal. The Greeks left stories describing the terrifying power of the Medjay. They wrote that these archers were almost superhuman, capable of drawing bows no other man could bend, sending arrows flying with unbelievable force and speed. And the Greeks were not exaggerating. An inscription from King Thutmose tells us how Kushite warriors were trained. He had his men run from one city to the next, a grueling distance of over 100 kilometers, simply as part of their conditioning. That's more than twice a modern marathon, just for training. On the battlefield, this produced a unit unlike any other, archers who could kill at long range, move with the speed of mounted troops, and reposition so quickly that they could change the entire shape of a battle in moments. Thutmose had commissioned these men into his ranks, but now he carried the burden of using them to their full potential. And so the training began, an accelerated, relentless crash course for every new recruit. Because the young king had a plan.
You know wrestling comes from Nubia, right?
But we perfected it.
Well then, defend this.
Ha!
Although they sometimes fought, Nubians and Egyptians were brothers, culturally, spiritually, and often biologically. In fact, to ancient observers, they were so similar that they were virtually indistinguishable from one another. This is clearly shown on the famous relief, often called the Canon of Lepsius, where Egyptians and Nubians appear side by side with nearly identical features, dress, and proportions. The artists who carved these scenes, under orders of the king for his tomb, were documenting reality. Two peoples deeply connected, sharing bloodlines, traditions, and a common world along the Nile. They share the same customs, they worship the same gods. The Nubians fit seamlessly into Egyptian society, not as outsiders, but as kin. And throughout Egypt's 3,000 years of history, one pattern repeats itself. Whenever Egypt was in danger, salvation came from the south, never from the north. From the Old Kingdom to the New, from the Hyksos crisis to the rise of the Kushite pharaohs, it was Nubia that stepped forward to defend the two lands. Their loyalty was not born of obligation, but of shared blood and a shared destiny along the Nile. By April, the king of Kadesh is ready to move his coalition of more than 10,000 men from the north toward Egypt. But the young king has no intention of waiting for the Syrians to invade. He refuses to fight a defensive war. He will invade Syria instead, strike first, and crush the rebels at Megiddo.
Stay in formation. Thutmose, son of Amun, will defeat the Asiatics.
The army marches at dawn.
Do not fear, Amose. The goddess Kemet is with us.
Have you seen battle before?
Yes, at the fortress of Jahu.
Then I will trust your word.
This momentous decision was carved onto the walls of the Temple of Karnak. Year 23, first month of the third season, 5th day. We departed this place at full strength to face our hated enemy and to extend the boundaries of Egypt. What happened next shows how Thutmose was ready to redefine the norms of warfare in his time. Determined to seize the initiative and catch the Asiatics off guard, he ordered his army to advance at a rapid pace, far faster than what any commander of the age would dare attempt.
Megiddo is only 2 days' march ahead!
From Sila, the Egyptian army pushed hard to Gaza, covering nearly 240 kilometers in just 10 days. Considering the sheer size of the force and the massive logistical burden of moving thousands of men, horses, chariots, food, water, and supplies, this march was nothing short of extraordinary. From Gaza, they pressed on for another 10 days until they reached the town of Yahim, where they finally rested and waited for scout reports, any intelligence that might help them in the decisive clash ahead. Soon after, they found themselves just 30 miles from Megiddo. Young Amos and his brother-in-arms, Sila, felt the weight of fear. Neither wanted to die in a foreign land, to have their souls trapped and suffer the terror of a second death. So they performed ancient rituals, rites meant to ensure safe passage to the afterlife should they fall on the battlefield. But the king had no time for fear. The scouts returned with their assessment of the terrain ahead, and Thutmose now faced the most important decision of his entire campaign.
The road is clear to Megiddo, my lord. The enemy is still training.
Get up. Come tell the generals.
But the king had no time for fear. The scouts returned with their assessment of the terrain ahead, and Thutmose now faced the most important decision of his entire campaign. For the first time, we hear of the king's own voice via the writings of scribe Tijaneni, and he says,
"That wretched enemy, the Prince of Kadesh, has entered Megiddo. He is there now."
That wretched enemy, the Prince of Kadesh, has entered Megiddo. He is there now. He has gathered to himself the chiefs of every land bordering Egypt, from near and far, even as far as Naharain, with their chariots and their troops. Surprise is the key. Move quickly, catch the Syrian off guard, and deliver a crushing defeat before they have time to fully assemble. Thutmose was presented with three possible routes toward Megiddo. The first was a winding northern road that descended onto a broad plain several kilometers above the city. The second followed the twisting valley of Dothan, emerging southeast of Megiddo near the town of Karnak. Though longer, both of these paths were considered safer, offering a large army room to maneuver and reducing the risk of being trapped. The third route was the most direct, the central road through the Aruna Pass, known today as the Musmus Pass, which opens straight onto the plain before Megiddo itself. But it was narrow, confined, and impossible for a large army to walk through safely. Thutmose convened his council of war. Most of his generals urged him to take either the northern or southern road, but not the direct and dangerous one. According to the inscription carved on the walls of the temple of Amun at Karnak, his advisors warned him, "How will it be to go on this road which becomes narrow when it is reported that the enemies are waiting out there and they are numerous? Will not horse go behind horse, and soldiers and people too? Will our vanguard be fighting while our rear guard is waiting here in Aruna and unable to fight?" They then pleaded with him not to take this more difficult and dangerous route. To the council's surprise, Thutmose rejected their recommendation, telling his council, "I shall proceed on this Aruna road." The reason for this was not that Thutmose disregarded his advisors or acted out of recklessness. Rather, he understood his enemy. He believed the king of Kadesh and his Canaanite allies would reach the same conclusion as his war council, and assumed the Egyptians would choose either the northern or southern routes. That expectation was precisely what he intended to exploit. Two days later, Thutmose and his army departed Yahim and made their way toward the Aruna Pass, where they set up camp for the night. Right before dawn, they advanced into the narrow corridor leading toward Megiddo. Scholars estimate that the entire Egyptian column, soldiers, horses, chariots, and supply lines, stretched nearly 20 kilometers as it moved through the confined pass. Thutmose himself rode at the head of the army. It was a grueling march. In places, the pass narrowed to barely 30 feet in width, but by nightfall, they had pushed through the entire length of Aruna, reportedly without encountering any Canaanite resistance. Thutmose had judged his enemy with flawless precision. The king of Kadesh was caught unprepared, never imagining the Egyptians would dare to surge through the central pass. His armies lay massed along the northern and southern roads, while only a token guard watched the mouth of the Aruna Pass near Megiddo, and that small force was swept aside like dust before a storm. Thutmose drove his banner forward and claimed the banks of the Kina Brook, where the army pitched its camp. Under the fading light of evening, the warriors of Kemet rested at last, the hush of night settling over them as they prepared for the colossal battle that dawn would bring. Early the next morning, the Egyptians crossed the Kina Brook and attacked. The precise details of the battle are unclear, though some things are known to us. The rebel Canaanite army had regrouped and positioned itself on high ground near the city. To the southwest was the Egyptian army, forming a concave formation that was divided into 3 groups. As they spread out, the left flank extended to the northwest of Megiddo to help cut off the enemy's escape along one of the roads leading to the city. With the opposite flank holding back the enemy, Thutmose, who was stationed in the center, personally led an attack that sliced through the Canaanite left flank, routing the enemy. It is there that the genius of the combined decisions of Thutmose became apparent. By forcing his men to march through the desert at an ungodly pace, for the past 2 weeks, the king had interrupted the plans of the Asiatics. They had not completed their full levy from the different tribes, but they had also not had time to fully train their new recruits and build up their defensive posture. Why, you may ask? Well, because they never expected the vastly outnumbered and less experienced Africans to dare an attack, let alone an attack on the stronghold of Megiddo. So, when, in the last hour, Kadesh heard that the Kemetic army was at their gate, they hurried to put up whatever defensive posture they could muster. But, as you will see, it would not be enough. This daring move through the mountains to catch the enemy off guard is all too reminiscent of this general, shown here, Hannibal, in his march through the Alps. Did Hannibal learn from Thutmose? Perhaps, of the attack, Thutmose III's inscriptions on the walls of Karnak tell us that the Canaanites saw His Majesty prevailing over them, and they fled headlong to Megiddo with faces of fear. They abandoned their horses and their chariots of gold and silver. The Asiatics had a few good reasons to flee. In an open field, the Egyptian chariot was one of the deadliest war machines at the time. Their chariot had an ultra-light wooden frame lashed with rawhide, lots of open space instead of heavy solid panels, and spoked wheels that cut weight dramatically. With the axle set toward the rear of the cab, the chariot was better balanced and more stable at speed than many of its Asiatic counterparts, which often had the axle closer to the middle. This meant Egyptian chariots could accelerate quickly, turn sharply, and remain steady enough for accurate shooting, all while racing across the battlefield. But what really made them terrifying was how the Egyptians used them. Each chariot usually carried a two-man team, a driver who controlled the horses, and an elite archer armed with a powerful composite bow made of layered wood, horn, and sinew. That bow had much greater range and punch than a simple wooden bow, turning the chariot into a fast-moving sniper platform. The Egyptians and Nubian archers had another trick up their sleeves. They mastered a technique of shooting multiple arrows in quick succession by holding 4 to 5 arrows on the non-shooting hand, just like this. That, coupled with their accuracy and mobility, made for an even more impressive archer unit and chariot. The surprise attack had not only caught the Canaanite rebels off guard, but also left them in a poor position to face the Egyptian chariots and infantrymen that were racing towards them from the south and west. They may also have been shocked when they learned that it was not a mere general or some other senior officer that was commanding the Egyptian forces, as had generally been the case during Hatshepsut's reign, but the Pharaoh himself. In panic, the Canaanite army fled towards the city of Megiddo, hoping to find safety there behind its towering defensive walls. The battle would have ended there and then in a decisive victory for the Egyptians, had Thutmose's usually disciplined troops not made a crucial mistake. Instead of pursuing the remnants of the Canaanite army as they fled towards the gates of Megiddo.
Look at this, Selah. This is more than enough to buy my family a horse.
And this is enough to take my wife to the kingdom of Punt.
Then we chose the right raid, brother.
Indeed we did.
The bulk of his men seemed to have stopped to plunder the hastily abandoned enemy camp, which included horses, chariots, gold, and the grand tent of the king of Kadesh. Unfortunately for the young Ahmose, he is critically injured while he was looting. His brother-in-arms, Selah, is not able to save him in time. The cruelty of war spares no one. Before he closes his eyes, Ahmose makes Sela promise on the goddess Ma'at that he will bring his share of the loot to his family back home in Kemet, Egypt. Before he could finish his goodbye, his good friend Ahmose had departed to join the ancestors. Unfortunately for the Egyptians, this lapse in discipline afforded the fleeing Canaanites a precious advantage. Many of their soldiers, and their chiefs as well, managed to dash through the gates of Megiddo and take refuge behind its stout walls. Those who failed to reach the entrance in time were hauled up and over the battlements by the townsfolk, using ropes hastily twisted from scraps of cloth. For the young Pharaoh, what ought to have been a swift and decisive triumph upon the fields of Megiddo instead devolved into a protracted siege. Its precise duration is a matter of scholarly dispute, though most reckon it lasted anywhere from 3 to 7 months. At length, with their stores exhausted and hunger ravaging the populace, the defenders of Megiddo capitulated. Yet, the victory was not without its sting. To the Egyptians' dismay, the rebel princes, including the king of Kadesh, had slipped away before the city's fall. Still, Megiddo's capitulation broke the back of resistance. Neighboring Canaanite towns surrendered in turn, and those that dared to hold out were soon subdued and brought once more under Egyptian dominion. The inscriptions of Thutmose III at Karnak record the considerable spoils won from both the enemy camp and the city itself. Golden chariots belonging to the Prince of Megiddo, some 892 standard chariots, armor of bronze and mail, 200 cuirasses of leather, 502 bows, more than 2,000 horses and colts, and upward of 20,000 head of cattle.
Ahmose wanted you to have this.
Thank you. I can't thank you.
Aside from his numerous statues, we are fortunate to possess the actual mummy of Thutmose III. It was discovered in 1881 in the royal cache at Deir el-Bahari by the team that included the Egyptologist Émile Brouche, who helped recover and examine the great pharaohs hidden there. Today, the mummy of Thutmose III resides in the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization in Cairo. The DNA analysis is still pending, but if you are interested in finding out more about the members of the 18th Dynasty and their origins, click here. For now, I would like to leave you with the picture of his grandfather, Thutmose I, considered by most the one who started the famous 18th Dynasty. Join us and see how those who are said to be without history birthed civilization itself. This is the Without History channel. Every episode we uncover little known and hidden facts about Black and African history. If you want to be part of the conversation and request topics for us to cover, join us for free in our Patreon group. It's thanks to the support of members like you that we can continue bringing truth so that the next generation doesn't grow up believing that they are without history. For those who want the soundtracks to our videos, you can follow us on our other channel, Without History Vibes. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor and leave a comment. And if you want us to cover more historical battles, join us in our free Patreon group to put in your request.